Good evening, America, and welcome to this special 4th of July edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you from Washington, D.C., as always. Happy Independence Day. Happy 248th birthday, America. A lot of us are probably wondering, as we've wandered through this last year since our last celebration, what sort of country are we going to be living in? I know we go through the stories on this show every day. FBI whistleblowers telling us that there are political litmus tests for who can be an agent, whether they support President Trump or not, being one of the deciding questions. An open border, so many lost lives because of that border, and a government that often denies and tells us don't believe what your eyes are seeing and what your ears are hearing. But even though we live through that and we report on it every day, there's still so much in this great country that gives us hope. Our commitment to freedom, our resilience, our ability to rise above even bad leadership, it's still here. I see it every day as I walk down the street or go into a grocery store or bump into a police officer, or certainly when I get a chance to meet with the men and women who wear the uniform and protect us on those front lines. America, it's a great birthday. We have a lot to still be proud of. Don't despair. Help is on the way. All right, let me bring in my amazing co-host who I know is decked out for this 4th of July holiday. Amanda, happy 4th. Good to have you, and your thoughts on this 248th birthday of America.
Happy 4th to you and to everybody tuning in today. I love the 4th of July because I love the celebratory nature of what this holiday represents. And I know that for a lot of Americans, it feels like we are teetering on the precipice of, a second term for Joe Biden, which can mean some pretty devastating things on a lot of these issues that people will be voting for come November. But it also is the promise of possibly a new transition, a new administration that can do some of the things that Donald Trump did the first time around. So it is a choice for the American people, and we are staring down the barrel of that choice coming in just a few months. And gosh, in a few months, John, a number of states will already be voting. But I love the 4th of July. I love, as you know, I go to a different part of California for this holiday because I like to go to a part of California that actually celebrates our country and celebrates our country's founding and what the 4th of July represents. So I always head up to Central Valley, to Visalia, to Devin Nunes's old district in Tulare County. And, it's the type of place where every house, every front porch is lined with an American flag, a pickup truck in the driveway, and patriotism abounds. Fireworks filling the sky, good food, and it's going to be an amazing time. And I have to say, heading into our next interview, or our first interview of the night, one of the things that happened to me before I went into politics, it was the end of my music career, or the point at which I was leaving the music world behind and going into politics. And I had really developed a fervor for American history. And the book that got me on that track was authored by our next guest, Bill O'Reilly. And John, I have to tell our audience, if you have kids who don't necessarily seem intrigued or enthralled with American history, start them out on Killing England. It reads like a novel. I have read it no less than a dozen times, and it is absolutely fantastic. As I've told you and Bill, I am a sucker for footnotes, and it is chock full of them. And it is absolutely, it is the most thrilling storytelling of the American Revolution that I think is out there. There are tons of great authors on this, but Bill O'Reilly ranks among the best.
Yeah, understanding the birth of this country is so important. Where we came from and where we left from is so important. Yeah. And I guess with that sort of introduction, we should waste no more time. Let's bring him in, the extraordinary historian, one of the greatest journalists I've ever witnessed in my life, and of course, the author of many books, all the Killing series, but a brand new one coming out this September. Get your copy early, Confronting the Presidents. What an amazing book. He's going to give you personalities, insights to the presidents you've never had before. Joining us right now, Bill O'Reilly. Bill, happy 4th of July.
Well, I appreciate it, guys, and thank you, Amanda, for mentioning that Killing England book. Everybody, when I go out, they say, well, what order should I read the books if I want to learn about our country? And I said, Killing the Witches is first, because I pick it up with the Mayflower, and then I bring you through the tremendous upheaval of the New World, and then Killing Lincoln would be third, because that's a civil war, and that changed everything. But in between is Killing England, because that was the fight of our lives. And we would still be British subjects had not Washington and the colonials defeated the most powerful military on earth. So we live in a country that is so extraordinary. And Amanda's right, because the urchins, the younger Americans, they don't know that.
They don't.
And it pains me, but that's why I wrote the 13 killing books. And Confronting the Presidents out September 10th will tell you everything you want to know about all 45 men, the good and the bad.
Yeah, we're really excited for that. I'm going through my advanced copy now. It's an amazing book. Bill, I want to step back for a second. We're just a couple of years from the 250th anniversary of the founding of this country. Your honest assessment of where you think this country is. I know a lot of people feel like, well, maybe it's King Joe now when we're back to the great British rule empire, but your thoughts on where we are at this moment in history.
Low point, no doubt. And the reason is multiple, but there are a couple of themes that I think your audience will be interested in. So we're in the middle of a social civil war. And the war is between traditional Americans like me, and I think you guys too, who understand why the United States is an exceptional nation. All the billions of people that we have freed all over the world at staggering blood and treasure. And we did that. America did that. And we led the way and still do. And the opponents to the traditional Americans are the progressive left, who basically feel that America is not a noble country, that we have exploited minorities, that we are imperialists, capitalists, capitalism's terrible, exploiters, you name it. They don't like this country. Now, they're a minority. I put the number at about 20%. But they now run the White House for the first time in history. Now, I know I'll get arguments about Barack Obama, but I know Mr. Obama, and I know his administration, it wasn't nearly as progressive as the Biden administration. Joe Biden does everything he is told to do by the progressive left. Everything. He's even thrown his own religious faith to the curb by promoting abortion, not accepting it, promoting it. That's how far out there Joe Biden is. So the progressive left has gained the White House, and that's a tremendously powerful position. And they have done it because the corporate media is on the progressive side. Doesn't make any economic sense, doesn't even make ideological sense, because corporate media is deeply steeped in capitalism. But trust me on this, without the media, Joe Biden is not president of the United States today.
Yeah, so true.
I think that's spot on. I want to ask you, though, about this, I guess the only message for the Biden presidency going into this election. We saw the 4.5-minute speech that he gave after the presidential immunity decision came down, and it seems to be that democracy is in peril. And if Donald Trump wins, then our democracy is over. First of all, it's a republic. But you look at the maneuverings of this administration, and it seems quite the opposite. But do you think that messaging works?
Well, again, Joe Biden has no sense of reality. He read the teleprompter because his people said, you got to get out there and show the American people you're still in charge. That was number one. And you got to pander to the far left progressives who hate Trump. That's number two. So he did it. But you'll notice he didn't answer any questions about it. Why would he do that? Why would he answer questions so that we, the people, could gauge what he was actually saying? He never does it. So I'm not calling him a dictator. He's not a dictator. He's just incompetent. I don't think he'll be on the ballot in November. I made that quite clear on my broadcasts and No Spin News and my columns on my radio shows. I don't think he's going to make it. Everybody in the country knows he cannot do the job. So the question then becomes, do you want anonymous people running your country, people you didn't vote for, people you don't know? Is that what you want? Because if you vote for Biden, that's what you're going to get.
Yeah, that's a great point. Downstream from him, there's a line of successors. Obviously, Kamala Harris would be first at the list. But none of those will have gone through the process of being vetted by the American people before this election. How does that swap occur? If Joe Biden drops out, talk us through the swap that occurs.
All right. So the pressure is mounting on Biden now. He would have dropped out already, by the way. I reported on Saturday that the decision had been made. And the two people who are most powerful in the Democratic Party are Barack Obama and a man named Ron Klain.
Right.
who was Biden's chief of staff for the first 2 years. They both want Biden gone because they understand he's not going to win, and the Democrats will most likely lose the Senate if he stays on the ballot. So the structure of the Democratic Party want him gone, and you can see it. James Carville, you can see the CNN people. They're all saying, and the New York Times, even the New York Times, you got to get out. And Jill Biden saved Biden, her husband, for a short period of time. She's like Nancy Reagan. If you read my book, Killing Reagan, Nancy Reagan is the most powerful person in the White House in Reagan's last 2 years in office. Jill Biden is the most powerful person in the White House now. No one gets to Joe unless you go through Jill, and Jill does not want to lead. And Joe does whatever Jill tells him to do. That's why he's still there. Now, as far as the other people are concerned, Kamala Harris is polling about 32% job approval. That's a disaster. Gavin Newsom, who wants it, I understand he's ordered more hair products, so that's an indicator. He's run California into the ground. Everybody who lives there knows that. They're on the verge of bankruptcy, that state. Pritzker in Illinois, all you got to do is take a look at Chicago. They don't really have anyone who could beat Trump now, with the exception of Michelle Obama, and they have locked down the former First Lady 100%. Nobody's getting any information about her at all.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Bill, you have been covering politics for so long, and you have been so knowledgeable and intimate with the inner workings of government. And I want to ask you about the presidential immunity ruling that came down on Monday. Everyone was waiting with bated breath. I think it was probably what a lot of us expected it to be. But does it really change much? Because if you listen to mainstream media, they act like presidents are going to be all-powerful tyrants now calling on death for their enemies.
Well, of course they do. So this is a simple issue. If a man or woman is elected president of the United States and doesn't have immunity for what he or she does in office, they can be sued every hour on the hour. They couldn't govern. They'd be in depositions all day. So you've got to have immunity. The question becomes, if a president goes outside his or her job and commits a crime outside of the job, that person is still subject to the law. That's what the Supreme Court ruled. Amy Coney Barrett was quite explicit on that. If you murder somebody and you're president, you're going to get charged. But the media doesn't want to hear any of that. All they want to do is brand Trump a tyrant dictator, and that the Supreme Court is now propping up the tyrant dictator. That's the narrative. And, when you look at the opinion polls, what is it now? 17% of Americans have faith in the corporate media anymore. Yeah. So everybody knows the game. And they're in business, the media, to prop up their favorite candidates. They want to make money, but they're talking to the choir now. It's not about gathering facts.
Yeah, that's a great point. Bill, on that point, do you see any inspiration for fixing the media? Our founding fathers wanted a free and independent press, and we have a complicit independent press right now.
I don't see any way you can fix it, John, because of the First Amendment. So I worked for CBS News when I was at CBS News as a correspondent. Dan Rather was the anchor. It was a liberal news agency, okay? It still is a liberal news agency. I worked at ABC News under Peter Jennings. It wasn't a liberal news agency as much as CBS was, because Jennings kept it, and so did Ted Koppel, kept it kind of on a fact-based track. Both of those men did that, all right? But now ABC is, like CBS, a little left. In the other corporate media, CNN, Fox News, NBC in particular has gone very, very left. And MSNBC is an embarrassment. But so is The View. And The View is run by ABC News. That's not an entertainment program. And Fox News has declined. They still have far and away the best talent, but they've declined on their ability to present things as they are. So, and it's the choir again. You make the money by talking to the people who want to hear certain things, and that's what you give them.
Yep.
When I was at Fox News, that never happened. And it didn't happen at ABC News. It did to some extent at CBS News. But there's not going to be a media reform. I don't believe it'll ever happen.
Yeah, you're going to end up looking like the European press, which would be a shame. Bill, what a great honor to spend some time with you on this 4th of July. I am so looking forward to the release of your book, Confronting the Presidents. Folks, go get it today. It will really enlighten you. It's a great book. I'm reading through it right now. All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break. More 4th of July conversation up next. Congressman Eli Crane, a man who served on the front lines for his country before joining Congress. He'll be here with us right after these. Welcome back, America, to this very special 4th of July edition of Just the News, No Noise. Amanda will be back in a few minutes. She's taking care of some other business, but she'll be rejoining us in the next block. I can't think of a better person to bring on this show as we celebrate the 248th birthday of this great country than our next guest. He served in the military as a Navy SEAL. He then kept continuing serving. Today, he serves in Congress in Arizona's 2nd House District. He's our good friend, Congressman Eli Crane. Congressman, happy 4th of July. Thank you for your service. This is a pretty amazing holiday after all the history we've just been through.
Yeah, it is, John. This holiday is important. I know your guests feel the same way I do. You know, when I think about this holiday and what it means, I'm definitely inspired by the men, women, and families that took a stand, you know, hundreds of years ago to make sure that we could be here today living with the freedoms that we have. And I often, like I'm sure you do, John, I think about what they would think if they came back and looked at the state that this country was in now, watching, you know, a tyrannical administration try and, you know, put their political opposition in jail for over 750 years, and just how woke, ridiculous our country has become. And you know, just from everything from borders to economics, etc. You know, and also on this day, John, I also like to think, you know, not only be inspired by the, you know, men and women that, you know, sacrificed so much that could have been, you know, hung in the town square just for meeting to talk about separation and independence. But I also want to ask myself, all right, Eli, what are you doing to make sure that it doesn't fall on our watch? Is there something more you can do? And that's why I love shows like yours. I'm inspired by some of the most hardcore patriots that we have right now, like Stephen K. Bannon, who just went to jail this week. Peter Navarro's in jail right now. And it's important that we that are watching, participating in your show, ask ourselves the same thing. Are we going to let this fall on our watch? Because it's up to us.
Yeah, it is our generation's duty to answer the call. You have your whole career. I think there's been an interesting switch in the polls in the last few weeks. You see more and more people believing that what's happened to President Trump is political, not legal. The Supreme Court obviously gave a pretty important ruling on immunity. Do you think the tide is turning, that people maybe didn't want to believe for a long time that what Joe Biden and the Democrats were doing was political, but now they're convinced of it?
You know, John, I'm seeing it like you are. I'm seeing it all over the places. You know, demographics that would have never taken a look at the Republican Party are starting to wake up. I mean, you can only put so many weights on this scale before, you know, people start to realize what's going on. And like the great Dan Bongino says, I guess people just haven't felt enough pain yet. And I think people are starting to feel so much pain when they go to the gas station, the grocery store, or whether they're trying to buy their first house, that they're realizing that things aren't right in Washington, D.C., and they're seeing the political persecution as well. And, you know, there can only be so many stories about the Laken Rileys of the world. Yeah. And you wake up every single day and look at your phone or your laptop, and you see another young American girl who's been raped and murdered, and see her complete family destroyed, her future destroyed by people who weren't supposed to be here in the first place, without Americans being like, you know what, this isn't what I signed up for. This isn't right. This shouldn't be going on. We've got to get back to putting our people first, our families first, our communities first. And so they know we need strong leadership. And when you need look no further than the debate that happened just a couple days ago to realize that it's a very easy choice on which one of those candidates is actually strong and which one should probably be in a, you know, honestly, a nursing home right now.
Yeah. Yeah, the fallout from that debate. I can't think of a bigger, more swift fallout from a debate in my time as a reporter in 40 years. It was really amazing. But the truth of the matter is, this is the same Joe Biden that was at the G7 at the Hollywood fundraiser that Barack Obama had to help him. The media and the people around the president kind of kept us from something that was sort of been going on for a long time. Do you feel that way, that this has been a secret for a long time from the public?
Well, I feel like the media has tried to keep it a secret. I feel like they've tried to gaslight the American people,
Yep.
but because, very few people actually watch the mainstream media anymore, and they're tuning in. They have so many more opportunities. They haven't been able to. I mean, there are channels on social media dedicated to Joe Biden's blunders, his gaffes, falling all over the place. So even though they've tried, they haven't been able to. But shame on the mainstream media. When the world is on fire, John, and this is the individual that's going to make key decisions if and when something, nuclear were to happen or some national catastrophe, shame on the media for gaslighting the American people for years and years and years, acting like this is the, Joe Scarborough, this is the greatest Joe Biden I've ever seen. I mean, it's so BS, but I'm glad that they got exposed once again for their lies, their misrepresentations, and their gaslighting of the American people. And I hope that their viewership takes a hit, accordingly. And I hope people start waking up and tuning in to programs like this one, where they'll actually be shot straight and just be given the news.
Yeah, just give them the facts. Trust the American people. If you give them the facts, they'll make the right decision. History shows this. They've done it time and again, and I think this generation will do that as well. I want to talk about the forces that are impacting your own constituents. If someone got on a plane this weekend to go for the 4th of July on a holiday, airfare's up 40%. If they went to the gas station, it's up over 35, 40%. Groceries can be anywhere from 20 to 70%, depending what you're buying. The grill got a lot more expensive. The economy really has caught up to Americans. They're starting to see that their budget's been eaten up, right?
Absolutely. And you know what they say, that inflation is the cruelest tax out there. And, Americans are getting hit really hard right now. They know that they're getting hit really hard. They can remember three and a half years ago to when they weren't experiencing this, when our economy was booming, when we had, safe and secure borders. I mean, they remember the difference between the last administration and this one. And that's why I think that you're seeing, even in states that, a lot of people thought were, gone. You're seeing President Trump do so well in the polls. And so we got to get out there. We got to, like I said earlier in the block, we got to ask ourselves, what am I doing? Am I doing enough to make sure that, we get the next 4 years to try and reverse some of this insanity? But even long term, John, because I know that we think pretty short term as conservatives and Republicans, am I doing enough to make sure that my kids and grandkids are going to be able to enjoy the life that you and I did? And that's something that, all of us have to take a little ownership and responsibility in.
Yeah, it's so important. Those are very important words to consider and internalize today on this 4th of July. I want to talk a little bit about the hot swap. If Joe Biden were to step down, and I don't think from the reporting I've done he's ready to do that yet, but if Kamala Harris swaps in, she was the border czar, it actually makes the border even more of an intense debate for Democrats, no?
I think she's definitely going to have a ton of trouble, John, if that's the decision that they make. I've heard reporting that it would be tough for them to just swap somebody else out. I've heard that there are states that, it would be tough for the new candidate to even get on the ballot. This honestly isn't my area of expertise, but I think no matter what they decide to do at this late in the game, with the individuals that I hear them talking about, including the president himself, if they choose to run him, I think whoever they put up is going to have problems, just based on when you look at the Democrat Party, John. They all are kind of forced to move in lockstep. Yeah. They really don't allow independent thinking. And, it's one of the reasons why, when you look at Joe Biden's career, where he started and where he's at now, and you see the flip-flopping on issues, how radical he's become, because that party's it's driven by its radicals, but they don't allow people to get out of line, or they squash them like a bug. And so all of them pretty much have the same policy. And I think that's going to be very difficult for anybody to come in and run against the individual, President Trump, who brought us so much wealth, so much prosperity, so much safety, and quite honestly, brought a lot of peace around the world.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Congressman, I want to ask about your colleagues in Congress. When they come back from this holiday break, there's a potential vote for inherent contempt. There is an opportunity to cut the budget a little bit in this bills and try to do something to address the border or create consequences for those who aren't addressing the border. Do you feel like the Republicans in the House can get something done for the American people when they come back on those issues?
John, I don't hold my breath. I think I've been pretty outspoken about how disappointed I am in this Republican conference, and even, sadly, our leadership. So I won't hold my breath. I will vote for inherent contempt. I'll continue to vote for us to cut spending, but based on even the little time that I've been in Congress, little over a year and a half now, I'm not going to hold my breath and think that this Republican conference, found religion overnight and is willing to actually do the things that we campaign on. I am hoping that, once President Trump returns to the executive position, that the amount of strength that he has will help guide and even heavily influence this conference to start doing what we tell the American people that we're all about, what our platform is, and what we're going to do for them. But as of right now, I don't expect to see much difference than what I've seen the last year and a half.
Yeah, last question for you. I know we got to go. You fought on the front lines. You put your own health and safety at risk every day as a Navy SEAL. We learned yesterday that the FBI has been doing security background checks, intentionally trying to move conservatives out of the FBI ranks. That came from a Democrat agent who became a whistleblower. Your thoughts on the idea that the FBI has a political litmus test for its agents?
No, I 100% believe that. I've been very critical of the FBI. I was one of the individuals that voted not to, give them the money necessary for a new headquarters. It just never ceases to amaze me, regardless of what institution that we're looking at, John, whether it's the FBI, how woke the military is gotten. This cancer, communistic, socialistic, Marxistic, Marxism and totalitarianism has just, it's eating away at our institutions and our society. And the FBI is just one branch of it. And this is why I get so frustrated, John, with my Republican colleagues who won't, use the power of the purse to force these institutions into getting back to the focus that they're supposed to be having, because that's the only language, unfortunately, a lot of these folks understand is when you play hardball and say, oh, okay, roger that. You guys want to persecute conservatives, purge them from your ranks. Roger that. Well, you're taking a 20 or 30% haircut. Then we can play this game too. And that's one reason that the American people love Trump, because he's shown time and time again he's willing to play hardball, and he runs this country like a businessman would. And that's why they want to see him back. So this is why we need more Republicans with backbone and spine. And so please, when you get out there and you're voting in your primaries, send us the individuals, John, that have a history and a lineage of doing the right thing when it's going to cost them.
Well, one thing I'm certain of with the Arizonans, they know that when they voted for you, they got a real return on investment, Congressman. You say what you mean what you say, and you get things done. Happy 4th of July. Thank you for joining us, sir. It's such a great honor to have you on the show. Folks, quick commercial break. We'll be right back after these messages.
Welcome back, America. Happy birthday, America, to this July 4th edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm Amanda Head, joined by my co-host and Just the News editor-in-chief, John Solomon. Thank you all so much for spending just a little bit of your Independence Day with us. And what better time to talk about how to save America than when we celebrate the day declaring our independence from Great Britain. And with us to do just that is the co-author of the book, Unhumans, The Secret History of Communist Revolutions and How to Crush Them. Yes, it's time to crush them. It's out now. He's also the host of Human Events Daily, which you can watch right here on Real America's Voice. Jack Posobiec. Jack, great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Amanda, John, so good to see you guys. I wish I was there in person, but of course, what can I say? 4th of July, that's a day where, I try to go out with the kids. We go out, we do the fire pit, we do the fireworks, we do as much stuff as possible. because we want to celebrate our freedoms, because we don't know. This might be the last 4th of July that we were allowed to do any of those things, because, by the way, we know that if these guys, and I keep saying this, people say, oh, they're Democrats or liberals. No, these are communists. These are communists, and I'm sick of playing these games anymore, that if we don't actually defeat them and stop them, not just in the election, but I'm talking about every institution, as John more than anyone has understood, how the infiltration that's going on through our entire government need to be rooted out and identified and removed as quickly as possible. We will lose this country. We will lose the system that has been given to us. We will lose everything that our ancestors fought for. And look, I'm from Pennsylvania. I'm from the Philadelphia area. Grew up going to Independence Hall. Grew up and going to Valley Forge. In fact, people know my wife, Tanya Tay. We got married in a church at Valley Forge. That's how important the 4th of July is to us.
That's cool.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jack, we see these patterns throughout communist revolutions throughout the history of the world. I just watched The Killing Fields about Pol Pot in Cambodia.
Oh, wow.
And the unfortunate
so
thing,
you've done the homework.
So you see instances of this happening right now, and that's a lot of what you talk about in this book, right?
That's exactly right. We have an entire section on communism in East Asia, so a whole section on the brutal repression of the Killing Fields, the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. And to your point, take it back a second. This is a system. What we are facing today is a system, and the outrages of the day, the outrages of whatever the deep state is doing next, or whatever some apparatchik is doing to people like our friend Steve Bannon, who actually wrote the foreword to this before everything happened to him, what he's going through right now as we speak, that we didn't know that it would be coming down as fast as it was. But this is a system that has been put into place for over 250 years, and we go back to places like the French Revolution. We bring you to the streets of the French Revolution, where they were targeting what? The religious. They were targeting tradition. They were targeting people who believed in a God and a creator, and replacing things with worship of science and worship of reason, and going through society and rooting them out. And this happened in Spain. It then happened in Russia, of course, as we know. It happened in China, of course. And the Khmer Rouge, Cambodia, and the Killing Fields, people don't know that what Pol Pot did, number one, that pound for pound per capita, one of the largest and most expansive genocides in the world in terms of the amount of people, of his own people, that he killed during peacetime, with the full backing of Chairman Mao, with the full backing of the CCP. So it's all interconnected. They all, one bleeds into the next. But some of the things that they stood for in the Killing Fields and in Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge, they said, we are going to create new people, and the new people would replace the old people. And what did they mean by this? They weren't just talking about age, by the way. They were saying that your ways of thinking, things like that there's only two genders, or things like the academics should lead. No, all of that will be taken away. Those who have now will be eliminated, and then utopia can be achieved. At one point, it got so bad in Cambodia and in their capital, Phnom Penh, they were even executing anyone, targeting anyone at least, who had glasses, because they associated wearing glasses with being an academic and being an intellectual. And so you just wearing glasses was enough to pull you off the street. And we see this again and again and again. They promise, they constantly do the same thing. Again, 250 years, we cracked their code on this. They promise utopia, they promise equality, but it always ends up in piles of skulls.
Yeah, those are powerful lessons of history that you've put together in one really captivating read. When you look at the communist socialist marches in history, there seems to be three elements, right? War on truth, control the narrative, then war on freedom, get rid of the freedoms, and then finally, capture the institutions. And I want to focus on that last part particularly because I remember in 2014 getting this document from one of the George Soros meetings, I think it was Transparency International, so one of those, and he talks about we got to start making friends at the State Department and FBI, and of course those friends are the ones who carry out Russia collusion a couple of years later. How did so many of our institutions, academia, FBI, intelligence community, State Department, how did they all get, Homeland Security Department now, how did they get captured by the left?
Look, that's a great question. And at first, it really was the State Department, and we go through all the way back to Alger Hiss and the Yalta negotiations, where it was that all of FDR's advisors were members of this communist cabal that were actually giving over vast swaths of territory, Eastern Europe and China, to the communist, to Stalin, gave him whatever he wanted. But then anyone who stood up to actually identify these people was ridiculed, was reviled. The investigations that were done to hunt the communists in our institutions, they went after the investigators rather than actually admitting what was done. By the way, it was American scientists who gave the nuclear bomb plans to the Soviet Union during the Cold War. And they, of course, paid a heavy price for that. But we have to understand that this was done. And then the investigators were turned through their friends in media, through their friends in academia, into the real demons, into the actual instigators of this. And so we see this partnership between media and academia predominantly throughout this. And then it goes to the underpinnings of the administrative state, which, John, you know more than anybody else, that what do? They work hand in glove with the Ivy League. They work hand in glove with so many of the institutions in America. So the first thing they did after the State Department, they didn't actually go to the other agencies yet. Where did they go? They went to the colleges. They went to the colleges and said, if we can train people, raise them up, particularly the Ivy League, which still has a hand-in-glove relationship with the administrative state in America, then we can take American sovereignty, which was supposed to be localized and centered in of course, we know the executive, the legislature, and the judicial branches. We can break open American sovereignty so that spills out into the administrative state and then even leaks out into the colleges. And it was through that system they were able to infiltrate through the back door.
God, what an amazing history.
Yeah. Jack, I want to shift gears and ask you about something that to me has been pretty revealing when you consider the reaction to the news regarding Julian Assange. It seems that there are two very different sides between supporting his situation and the fact that he's not, as of right now, not going to have to see any time behind bars. And folks like Mike Pence, who had some interesting comments to say over on X. What do you make of his release, and what do you make of the reaction behind it?
Well, look, here's what I think is interesting about Assange, and I say this as a prior Navy intelligence officer myself. So I served in the IC. I was someone who was entrusted with protecting secrets, an oath that I've certainly never broken. And when it comes to his release of classified information, that's something for me as a patriot. I look back and I say, I don't like it. I don't naturally like the release of classified information at first. That's just my natural inclination. However, I've come to learn, and I've had a bit of a character arc on this as well, that when your government is committing abuses and abusing power, and this was something I didn't understand back in 2009 and 2010 and 2011 when I was still serving, that when your government is committing those abuses and then hiding said abuses behind the veil, behind that cloak of classified information, then suddenly it is actually in the interest of the people and in the interest of the nation to reveal that information. And I think that's what Julian Assange has really done here. And so I think a lot of people who have this natural inclination that we don't want to be revealing, clandestine operations of special forces or CIA operations where we're actually getting information from our adversaries around the world. Yes, of course. Yeah. But at the same time, if your government is conducting abuses, that's what should be made public and what should be investigated.
Yeah, Jack, I think you and I have a similar arc on that. Everybody, you have to go check out his book. I think it should be required reading for kids these days, Unhumans, The Secret History of Communist Revolutions by Jack Posobiec. We'll be right back. Welcome back to this Independence Day edition of Just the News, No Noise. As always, I'm Amanda Head, joined by my co-host and Just the News editor-in-chief, John Solomon. Thank you all so much for being with us tonight. And who better to bring on this 4th of July than a historian who understands the significance of our country's founding and what we stand for. Joining us now is Ronald Reagan biographer and presidential historian. He's the author of many excellent books. Craig Shirley, thank you so much for being here. Happy 4th of July, sir.
Happy 4th of July, Amanda.
We are so happy to have you. And, I always love 4th of July. I love celebrating the Declaration of Independence. I love celebrating our divorce from the crown. But there's just something that rings a little bit more exciting about the 4th of July during an election year. I think that people on both sides of the aisle, they see the prospect of what could change or stay the same in that election cycle coming up this year. But what is your reflection on that, considering what took place last Thursday, the debate that the world watched?
Well, Amanda, that's such a great question. I think the one word that comes to mind for me is freedom. That's what was the organizing principle of the American Revolution, and that's what we had the freedom to see our president fall down on his face. We had the freedom to see our president fail because he's a doddering old man. They'd been covering up for a while, and I must say is that this is not about the Declaration, but about the Constitution. In the First Amendment, jammed in there among the personal freedoms of freedom of assembly and freedom of religion is freedom of the press. Now, the framers and founders did not like the pamphleteers and the broadsheets of the era. They hated them, but they saw the press then as a valuable ally of the people against their government. And it worked for 150, 200 years. John Adams imprisoned newspaper editors who displeased him. Abraham Lincoln imprisoned editors who displeased him. Woodrow Wilson, took actions against newspapers who editorialized against his policies. Is that every president up to John Kennedy canceled the subscription to the New York Herald because he disliked its Republican editorial policy. But the press was supposed to be an adversary of government, of power, and an advocate of the American people. And it worked for 200 years up until recently with the advent of Obama and then later Biden. And it became not a adversary, but an ally of the powers that be. It became almost a state media covering up for Joe Biden's many failings as let's face it, a doddering old man. And they kept it from the American people. They kept the American people did not have the freedom to know what they should have known about the many, many failings of their president, covered up by the national media. And so we had the freedom to see there in all its ugliness how bad our president was physically was mentally infirmed, and so it calls into question that whole debate about the proper role of the national media. And that's why, programs such as this have become so important, and Newsmax and Fox have become so important because you've sprung up now as allies of the American people against your government. So I applaud you. My hat's off to you. 3 cheers for you. Huzzah for you, because you're fulfilling a role set 200 years ago by the framers and founders in the First Amendment that the liberal national media has failed at.
Thank you for saying that. It is true. The free press was always going to be a part of this country. And for the last 10 years, they've been anything but free of the influence of the elitists in government. It's just amazing. Craig, I want to turn to something about the debate, because the optics of Joe Biden and him falling flat in his face and the mumbling and the stumbling and the bumbling overshadowed something. If you took all the optics off and maybe you just read a transcript, there is a vastly different set of ideas between these two men. One believes in a free marketplace and lesser government and putting individual rights and freedom first. And the other believes in collectivism, globalism, and big government. And that got lost, I think, because people were so starkly shocked by Joe Biden's appearance. But talk about the ideology difference. There couldn't be two different candidates when it comes to policy.
Bingo. You just hit the nail on the head, John. Is that's one thing that dismays me about that debate, is with all the focus on the visuals, on the image of Joe Biden's many, many failings, is that we didn't get a chance to really focus as Americans on the stark policy difference between the two. Is that you're right, there could be nothing more different than these two men philosophically. Joe Biden is a collectivist. Joe Biden believes in big government. Joe Biden believes in taking freedoms from people in order to satisfy political constituency, whether it's in the form of taxes or regulation or speech. The left always talks about freedom, but what they believe is that you can take freedom away from one person and give it to another and call that freedom. Well, that's not freedom. freedom is the expansion of freedom for all people. And that's what we as conservatives, we believe in, that we're the heirs of the American Revolution because we believe in maximum freedom, as Ronald Reagan said, maximum freedom consistent with law and order. So, and of course, there's Donald Trump, who believes in, freedom for the individual, freedom from excessive taxes, even down to, even down to allowing waiters and waitresses to keep their tip money. It's a small gesture, but it's an important gesture.
Yeah.
Is that it takes, power can neither be destroyed nor created, right, John? Is that it can only be moved around. And from the time of the New Deal up until recently, power has been moving away from the American people toward government. With form of regulation, a form of taxation, even in the form of regulating speech, is that it's been moving away. And so here's Donald Trump, standing against government, draining power away from the American people and pushing back against it, and taking power away from government, giving it back to the people. And Joe Biden's exactly the opposite. Yeah. So you're absolutely right.
Really stark.
There couldn't be a more stark difference between the two men.
Yeah, you said it brilliantly. You're right.
Craig, before we let you go, I want to ask you, the state of New York hasn't been won by a Republican since Ronald Reagan, someone who you have chronicled numerous times in books. What do you see regarding Ronald Reagan's New York policy or his strategy in New York and Donald Trump's? Are they similar?
Well, yes. I just wrote a piece about this, as a matter of fact, Amanda, Trump's New York strategy echoing Reagan's 1980. Reagan, there was a third-party candidate, just as there is today, a liberal third-party candidate, just as there is today, who also drained liberal votes away from the Democratic nominee, just as they did in 1980. John Anderson did. It took votes away from Jimmy Carter, just as Robert Kennedy Jr. is poised to take votes away. But that's not enough, is that Reagan assembled a new governing coalition. You remember the Reagan Democrat. We've had certain politicians who are revolutionaries. RFK assembled a new political revolution. JFK assembled a new political revolution with the advent of young voters, young Americans. And certainly Ronald Reagan did. And now Donald Trump is also assembling a new political anti-government, a anti-tax, a more personal, freedom-oriented political revolution. Those are on his side. And so it's possible to reach out to disaffected Democrats and culturally conservative Democrats in New York. That's right. And actually make a play for New York
Craig,
State.
I'm so sorry to cut you off. I love that comparison that you made, and it's been really interesting to watch, and we'll be seeing that again leading into November. Craig Shirley, presidential historian. Everybody go check out his books. We'll be right back. Welcome back. It's the last segment of the show. John, something that Craig was talking about that really kind of rang true with me. The fact that the media seemed so shocked after the debate, but I really don't think they were. I think that they have been covering up what everyone has seen very plainly for a long time. And I know a lot of people complain about hashtag fake news out there in the mainstream media like it's a new thing. It is not a new thing. Around the 4th of July, I love reflecting back on our nation's founding. There was a newspaper in New York that published fake letters of George Washington to try to turn public sentiment against him and the war effort. So just something to think about. We have to fight for freedom every day of our lives in our own ways. Yeah, and the free press is often right now a hindrance on American freedom because of its bad performance. I just have one thought as we end this 4th of July. Whether it's the price of the hot dog or the 40% increase in your airfare ticket this 4th of July, big government is not free. It comes with consequences in the wallet. And it comes with consequences to our personal liberties. And I think the last couple of years have made that painfully aware to people who might have been willing to try a bigger government for a while, but it costs too much freedom, it costs too much money, and I think we can't afford another 4 years of it, is what I'm beginning to hear voters say. Yeah, and doubling down on the big government thing, even if they were to give Joe Biden the boot, bringing in someone like Gavin Newsom, who runs his own big government in Sacramento, in a state that is so bad that people have left in such large numbers that there are no U-Haul trailers back here. So I I think that the American people, I think you're right. I think we dipped our toes in the big government pool for a little while and realized that there's just way too much crap swimming in it, and we don't want any part of it. Oh, what a way to wrap up our 4th of July special. We hope you all have had a wonderful Independence Day. Hope that you still have the same number of fingers that you did yesterday. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place, 6 o'clock Eastern here on Real America's Voice. See you then.